Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start our section here with Greta Thunberg. She was an environmental activist. She had a quote in the 20 teens at the United Nations: people are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are at the beginning of a mass extinction. And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? So, about this, how much do you really care about the environment? Because I actually really care about the environment. Okay, I really don't like smog. I don't like air pollution. I love pristine outdoors, nature, all in its beauty and glory. I would rather people not have their property and lives destroyed by things like wildfires because of drought. And I love, pristine beaches, clean water, abundant aquatic wildlife. So maybe when we get into caring about the environment, maybe we should take a look at how much do you really care about the environment? Not do you care about the environment, but how much do you really care about the environment? Because this term, eternal economic growth, there's some benefits to eternal economic growth, like, air conditioning. So I can work in warm places in a cool environment. There's vaccines that came from economic growth. There's technology that came from economic growth. There's trade. We can get stuff from different lands at a cheap price with eternal economic growth. So maybe we want to rephrase this from do you care about economic growth or climate change to how much do you care about economic growth and how much do you care about climate change? Because what we're going to be dealing with here is everybody actually cares about both of these things at the margin. Which brings us to the next type of cost. This is the idea of the marginal cost, otherwise known as marginal thinking. And that is economics rule number 4, which is rational people think at the margin. They do not think of absolutes, they think of how much more is beneficial to me. Thinking at the margin is simply asking how much more. It's not the act of should I go to Mr. Silver Brown's class, because yeah, you do think that, but marginal thinking is more like how long do I pay attention to Mr. Silver Brown's class? This is actually a question that starts sending me greater amounts of information and allows you to have greater pull and influence over your own choices. Essentially, marginal thinking is what is the cost and benefit of paying attention one more minute, doing one more extra thing. Okay. You're essentially asking, is my next action or unit, what I do, is it worth doing? Okay. Because everybody cares about in the environment, but they care at the margin, meaning everybody cares about the environment until the cost of caring about the environment outweigh the benefit. For every action you do, there's some point where you say, I will not do it anymore. That's marginal thinking. Should I do this next thing? Does it benefit me enough to keep doing it? Okay. And in economics, we call that marginal benefit and marginal cost. If I engage in an action, doing one more of whatever that is, that's supposed to gain me a marginal benefit. And then marginal cost is if I do that extra thing, there's going to be a greater cost associated to that. So let's think about it like this, like things that can help the environment. Well, we know that eating less meat can help the environment, but at the margin, it's not about eating less meat as much as how much less meat is actually going to do good and how much less meat would you really want to not eat. Carbon pollution is bad. Cars are both good and bad. But the question isn't whether you should drive or not. It's maybe how you drive or how much you drive. I mean, there's a difference between you going to work and you sitting in a drive-through, literally going nowhere with your car on and putting out pollutants. Most of us would agree that air conditioning is awesome, but it uses energy, and energy creates climate change. And but the question is not whether or not you should have air conditioning. Maybe it's at what temperature do you set that air conditioning where you can get the greatest bang for your buck. And houses, we all want to own a home or have a dwelling. Maybe that's not the question of should you have one or not. Maybe the question is how big should that house be? How much land do you actually need? or want. So when we get back to our issue of climate change here again are the biggest impacts of climate change. But now we're not just talking about the money associated. Now we're not just talking about, should I put more energy to transportation or deforestation? Now the question is, what is the marginal benefit for each impact? So if I spend $40 million, how much is that going to get me in terms of fossil fuels as opposed to meat? What's the marginal cost of each choice? If I decide to put more money towards transportation cuts, what's the marginal cost of that extra money versus the marginal benefit? And what's the marginal cost versus putting it towards deforestation? Which choice to cut is the greatest at the margin? Should I take care of gas flaring, trash, deforestation? So one thing we do know is that we don't want to get rid of one extra child because, of course, there's a huge benefit in it. If you get rid of one extra child, for every child you do not have is the potential next innovator that could help maybe even solve the issues around climate change. So then it comes to look at all of these things we have to deal with. If we're going to cut fossil fuels, transportation, construction, meat, burning of wood or agriculture, metal, concrete, deforestation, gas flaring, and trash, which one has the greatest benefit? The greatest, if you cut that one unit, really hits at the margin. That's what you would be looking for. Where do you get the most bang for your buck? And you think about this idea of thinking, how long should you practice until you actually are getting a little bit worse? How much pizza dough should I buy if I'm buying pizzas? How long should I stay open? How many employees should I hire? How much money should I put towards healthcare? How many TikTok posts should I make when I advertise my company? How long should school be closed? How long should a student quarantine when they had COVID? All these were issues at the margin. What's the difference between 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day, 6 day, 10 days in a student quarantine? And then where's the biggest benefit versus the biggest cost for every one of these you add on? Okay. So basically, marginal is the change that results from a little more or less of an activity. So when you're thinking at the margin, you want to pursue the activities you want where marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. You stop doing something when the extra unit basically gets you equal benefits and costs, because equal benefits and cost means you get nothing out of it. So you want to stop doing something when marginal benefit equals marginal cost, and you want to find the thing to do that's going to give you the biggest marginal benefit you can. The other cost that people often get wrong when they start thinking about at the margin is sunk costs, and these are costs that have already been incurred and are totally irrelevant. When we're talking about marginal costs, we're actually thinking about choices in the future, which really matter because they're going to impact me going forward. Some people look at marginal costs and they think of, well, I got to keep going because of something that you bore way back there that you can't ever really change. Okay. Sunk costs are costs that have already been incurred and you cannot get back and you cannot recover them. All right. This is also known around economic circles as the sunk cost fallacy. Okay. So think about it like this: I can't walk to school. I just bought a new car. Well, you can walk to school just because you bought a new car. That cost is sunk. You're not getting that back. Doesn't mean you can't walk to school, and that's a way to help the environment. The oil industry invested so much in being efficient. They can't switch over to alternative energy right now. No, that's not the way it works. Yes, you invested a lot in being efficient, but that doesn't mean you want to do things beneficial going forward. You shouldn't think about what you invested back then that may not be relevant anymore. We can't build high speed rail because we just built this highway. Again, you built the highway and the highway is there. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do something that could potentially be. I'm not saying high speed rail is an answer to anything, but you don't not build it because you built a highway. If it's better, if it can produce better outcomes at the margin, then you want to do it. You don't sit there and say, we can't do it because we already did this thing over here. No, that cost is sunk. It's gone. What you want to do is things looking forward. I always did X behavior a certain way. I put so much time and effort into doing it this way. Why should I change? Well, don't just simply do something because you've done it before. It might have worked before, it may not have. But if you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about what you're going to do going forward. Okay. You have no control over the sunk costs because they happened and they're already done. This should not be a part of the decision making process. Don't think backwards, think forwards. Here's a little example. Let's say you have the the holy warriors of baseball, the Los Gigantes, versus the evil devils of Southern California, the Dodgers. And you get together with some friends. You're going to go to a Giants game. Parking's going to run you $20. You know, gas, if you all chip in, is going to run $20 each. Tickets 160, food $50 on the cheap end. You're probably looking at $300 to $400 total, and obviously hours of human capital doing this action. So you get to the bottom of the third. Logan Webb has pretty standard, especially against the Dodgers, is pitching a 12-0 shutout. Dodgers suck. Just a note. So the question becomes, when do you leave? And seriously, when do you leave? It's a blowout. We know the Dodgers are evil and terrible, and they get what they deserve. But at what point do you leave that park? Or do you like 12-0 baseball games, which are pretty boring? You might come up with the idea that I need to get my $400 worth. And that's the wrong way to think. You already spent the $400. You already spent the hours getting down here. Those costs are sunk. You've already spent all that. The real question is, I'm going to leave when my benefit equals cost. So I'm not really having any fun here anymore. Maybe I could have more fun doing something else. That's the money, the time, all that is sunk. At the margin, every minute or every half inning that you stay in that ballpark, if it's getting worse for every minute that you're staying there, then maybe you should really consider, I need to get up, I need to leave, I'm going to go for a walk along the bay, I'm going to go to a museum, I'm going to go hang out with friends somewhere else. But understand, when we're dealing with marginal thinking, we're asking, how much more of this do I do? And we want to think forward with that. When you're thinking about sunk cost, you're thinking about things you can never get back and recover.